We are live. Hi, this is Petrie.
Hi.
Bernie Petrie, the Soul's Life Coach, creator of the Barefoot Sanctuary and the Barefoot Talks, and I am sitting in outside Loudon's Cafe with the wonderful Jennifer Main.
Hi.
And who is coming down to North Berwick once again. She came last May.
Yep.
Last May, a whole year.
No, was that 2 years?
2 years? 2 years.
I don't know.
Two
Yeah, maybe
years.
it was a
Yeah,
year.
time flies when you're writing books. So she's coming back down again, and the talk is who would we be without labels? And the reason I was laughing at the start is because I said 3 instantly, and it's definitely been something that has been really highlighted to me about always, like, letting go of labels. So can you chat a bit about why this subject is important to you, Jen?
Yeah, so the reality is that we as human beings, we learn a lot through labels. We label something because we're trying to understand it, and if we give it a name or give it a label, then we can recognize how it's different from something else. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, and we use language to help us with that. But when you get stuck in those labels, or when you get set in them, or you start to judge based on labels, then that's when the problems start to happen. And I think we become really invested in our labels, and we become afraid to change things in our lives because we're afraid we're going to have to let go of a label to do that. And if it's a label we were very proud of, or we felt gave us some power or prestige or anything like that, then it stops us from taking that next step and evolving in maybe a different way. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I know that certainly when I think labels have been there from the beginning for me. Growing up in Northern Ireland, you had a religious label.
Yep.
You had first of all, you were defined by your sex.
Yep.
Then it was religion, and then when you went on to college, it was the course that you were on,
Yep.
and it was just it's constantly being put in boxes,
Yep.
and where you lived and everything else, and then your job. And when no job seemed to ever give me a good enough label that would make people go, wow, and then when I got one that made people go, wow, it was like nothing was happening. There was nothing inside that went, wow. It was like, but then also becoming a mother and not having people say, what do you do? That was like, many women would say, oh, I'm just a mum, or I'm a stay-at-home mum, and all that started to really mash up for me, which is why I started to dig deeper.
Yeah, I was kind of the other way, because when it was time for me to leave my last job, I was really invested in that, and I was really proud of the work that we did there. And it was this thing of, I'm going from being a project worker to a healer or a coach, and it was kind of that thing of, well, how do I describe who I am or what I do, whereas the label I had in that job was very comfortable. So I actually dragged my heels a bit leaving that job because of my fears around all of that. But then after I left, it was great. It was a great decision. So, but it was funny how all these fears were kind of triggered around, what will I tell people I do?
God, and just that pause of, Kirsty Robertson is watching. Hello, Kirsty. Yay. Just that whole, being able to not realizing what's happening inside of our body when someone sort of asks us for a label, can bring up maybe that there's just inner work to be done then.
Yeah, and I think it's recognizing how they evolve and why they evolve, and if there is resistance to it. And I know that we've gone to a lot of Alison McKenzie's networking events, and I always laugh because every time I stood up for my kind of minute spiel, it would be totally different every time, but it was because I was like, I don't want to say the same thing every time. I don't want it to be the same. So there was part of me kind of looking for, well, how do, and also that thing of, well, how do you use words in a way that are really accurate? Because they're, in so many ways, our words, they're amazing. They can help express so much, but in some ways they may feel a bit limiting because no one label is ever going to really fit a person or describe everything about them. So it's trying to figure out, how can I find the best words that help me to express myself, but in a way that does not feel limiting. And I think a lot of people have a hard time, especially when they're in periods of kind of evolution or growth, or where that transition period feels a bit difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah. So would you say that when you hear yourself say, I am blah blah blah, and it doesn't something doesn't quite resonate inside, that's a big clue from your soul that no, you're not, or that's not enough, or that's you're hiding behind that.
It can be some of those things, but it can also be that we're actually going to do some stuff with this during your talk.
We're going to do some stuff. Oh, she's saying hiya. Oh, cool. So that's on the 31st of May.
Yes, come.
Thursday week. So next Thursday, 31st of May at 7:30 at the Barefoot Sanctuary in North Berwick.
Yeah.
We had a great audience last time for you, so
Good fun.
we're hoping lots of people who haven't been there before will come as well, because it's a great opportunity it's a real starting point, I think, when you start looking at labels. So we're going to do something on the night.
Yeah, we're going to do a couple of exercises with that to help you. Some of it's kind of just starting to question what labels you've accepted and whether they still really resonate or not. Because it may be that some of your labels are fine and they totally help.
Yeah.
But it's also worth recognizing, okay, maybe I've outgrown this, or maybe it just needs to change slightly, or maybe I can just drop this altogether.
Yeah.
Sometimes
just
that's good
drop
too.
a label. Yeah. Drop a label.
I think finding that fluidity and flexibility sometimes with our labels is maybe a healthier, more harmonious way to deal with it, instead of feeling like it's got to be all or nothing, that I've got to have this and it's got to be exactly right, or I just have to get rid of it, because those extremes are also a bit of that kind of something's not right, but I don't know what to do.
So in terms of, like, for people who are, McEwen, one of my old friends from Northern Ireland, hello. For those that are watching that are thinking, what do you mean labels? In what ways have you experienced with people you've worked with where it is literally labels that are keeping them stuck, or attachment to labels?
Yeah, well, even things like, so a lot of my background has been with addiction, and so many people will have these, so the labels that go with addiction, and the way people judge themselves, and the names they call themselves, and the way they speak about themselves, either what they've heard from others or just what they're judging themselves as well, that can be so limiting to get out of, and it becomes this kind of perpetual thing of, well, I'm an addict and I'm always an addict. And I think that we can even do this with less kind of heavy labels as well. And even things like, somebody says I'm a mother. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
That is something totally different for everybody. And I think we can redefine a lot of those things within ourselves, and recognizing that we can make that word or make that label what we want it to, instead of feeling like other people's perceptions or perspectives have to dictate how we act within that label, is another big step within that too. Because you don't want to feel trapped or ashamed or whatever because you are a mother. You want to recognize that there's freedom within that as well, and there's creativity and creation. So again, I think some of this is just kind of redefining it for you, and so it's something that feels aligned and empowering instead of something that feels limiting.
Yeah. Well, actually, even then, as you say, going on to think about every day, we could be saying things to ourselves like, I'm unorganized, or I'm impatient, or I'm such a clot, or whatever. That it really brings to the fore the whole inner dialogue that, with who would we be without the inner labels and the inner dialogue that we don't even realize is driving our behaviors, how we show up, how we allow ourselves to be in front of other people.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, just speaking as an American, there's a
She's
lot
an
of
American.
Yeah.
Can you tell? Oh, there's Sheena Skinner. Hello.
There are a lot of ideas and opinions about Americans right now, which don't necessarily reflect how I would judge myself. And it is that natural thing that when you meet people, they want to know, where are you from, what's your background, what's your history, what do you do, all those things. And if you are holding back because you don't want to admit to a label because you're afraid of how you're going to be judged because of it, then that causes a lot of conflict in communication and in how you express yourself, and feeling like you need to hold back or shy away from certain conversations and things like that as well. So
you can feel the satellite navigating you down, and you're like, they're gasping, they're getting closer to who they think, and then once they're just going to box me in that. And I think, well, for people growing up in Northern Ireland, not our accent wouldn't have given us away in Northern Ireland, but our name would have.
Right.
And so people would ask you your name, and this is the programming that I had. When I heard someone's name, my inner dialogue went Catholic or Protestant. There wasn't a judgment about whether they were, because I was blessed to be brought up where both my parents didn't pass any of that on. They saw everyone as equal, but there was this judgment, and therefore there was a judgment on how I thought they would see me immediately, which then, rather than just being two people, meeting, there was instantly a barrier. Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
So
Makes sense.
So it takes practice.
Yeah, well, I think the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
And then once you start to become aware of how you're either responding to others because of how you think they'll perceive you or how you're perceiving them, when you can start to break that down and challenge that, then you can start to change a lot of the behaviors and the ways of thinking, and not getting caught up in old kind of prejudice and privilege and all these things that are huge right now that loads of people are talking about, which is fascinating and amazing, and it's such a cool time. But yeah, I think we're in that process really of starting to look at these labels and kind of going, okay, well, what fits and what do we alter, what do we let go of?
Yeah, because there are certain labels that we have to own, that we can't deny that we have, like sort of privilege and all those things that mean that, you know, if we didn't have that, how would we experience the world as well? So much to talk about. So this is happening on the 31st of May at the Barefoot Sanctuary at 7:30 till 9. Jennifer Main talking about who would we be without labels, and so there will be interaction. We're going to do it as a Facebook Live event like we did last month. Obviously we won't be able to say shout out highs. Maybe I don't think we could do that. It's quite tricky to concentrate, but it will mean that people who are too far away, like Sheena and Una that are watching, you can see it from afar and obviously share it so we can get this subject talked about much further, because it really, I think it's huge in our ability to stay fully present.
Yeah. I think so many people are so burdened by their labels. They feel like they're carrying so many and that they have to fit in with all of those. But if you're trying to fit in with 20 different labels, that's just going to create a bunch of inner conflict and drama and problems. So it's just kind of, bring yourself up a bit, have some breathing room.
Yeah, because you're not able to be yourself. And yourself is who you've been from the word go, the essence of who you are. And letting that come out means letting go of those labels.
Yep.
Like it.
Yeah.
Like it. Cool.
Yep.
So that's what's happening. Do come along, let us know. I'll share this video. We will make sure we save it before we post it. Jennifer's going to keep me writing that. It all keeps changing. But yeah, so it's going to be on the 31st of May at the Barefoot Sanctuary. And you also will have copies of your book that you wrote post because Jennifer, when she came and spoke before, she hadn't yet published her book, and now she's published her book. Hi, Kirsty Boston. Hello. She's published that book now, and she will have copies with her, and we'll do some signing of those, and it is a wonderful, again, well, I guess that ties in so much with what we're talking about now, because that book was called The Space Between. So the space between is who we are without labels. Is that a deliberate thing? Do you think?
That's a good interpretation of that. I like that.
Yeah, let's go. I'll be watching far away, ladies. Wonderful, Sheena. It'll be great to have you watching. It was such a hit when we did it last month, and we did a Facebook Live. It was people who had really wanted to come that couldn't come because of geographical boundaries. Loved it, and it really added an extra element. So we're delighted to use the medium of Facebook to do that. But if you can be there in the flesh, you'll get to be in because I remember when we did it 2 years ago, the feeling in that room was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Great. Yeah, it was a great group. Really, group of people who are really open to talking about things which maybe make them feel vulnerable, but really willing to kind of go there and allow some shifts to happen, which is great.
Wow. Well, it is wonderful to be doing this with you again. You can see how much I adore this woman, and I'm just so thrilled that you're coming back.
Thank you for having me.
North Berwick.
Excited.
So we'll see you on the 31st, either on the screen or in the flesh.
Yes, thanks very much.
Bye. So I do finish?
Yep.